On the 13th of January, the Taiwanese people voted for war,
presidential election in Taiwan.
Voters in Taiwan.
In Taiwan's presidential elections.
Won Taiwan's presidential election.
Taiwan's presidential election has been described as a choice between war and peace.
Earlier this month, Taiwan's presidential elections ended in a victory for Vice President William Lai. According to the opposition, Lai is, and I quote, a die-hard independent supporter who will bring Taiwan closer to conflict with China. But don't take it from them. Beijing called Lai a dangerous separatist and the election a, and I quote, choice between war and peace. But the thing is, a vote for Lai was a vote for the status quo. He pledged to pick up where his boss leaves off and not move the furniture around too much. Now, if that's the case, then does Beijing think that Taiwan has been on a warpath for the last 8 years? And with the election behind us, is the Taiwan FUD over? Or do we need to market sell our TSMC bags before it's too late? Let's investigate. Now, if you've seen any of our previous videos touching on Taiwan, you may remember that we made a circumstantial case for military conflict in the Taiwan Strait becoming more likely. But as we emphasized in that video, we do not suggest that war is about to break out. Rather, that the chances of war seem to be drifting further from zero, and that's something that should never be overlooked anywhere. The fact is that Beijing and Washington are locked into a pattern of tit-for-tat escalation, where each feels compelled to reciprocate in kind because they can't afford to appear weak. Neither thinks that they are the aggressor. Instead, that each believes they're only reacting to the other's provocations. And caught in the middle of all of this is Taiwan. The country of Taiwan has spent its entire history walking a tightrope between two adversarial superpowers. Any sudden movements and things could get ugly fast. That's why Taiwan's presidential elections are always a source of angst for basically anyone paying attention. But as it turns out, after walking a tightrope for 70 years, you develop a pretty good balance. Taiwan's status quo is complex and precarious. Geopolitically speaking, it's been dealt a rough hand. But the island is at peace. It emerged from a 38-year military dictatorship to become one of East Asia's most successful liberal democracies and managed to monopolize the global semiconductor trade in the process. Taiwan is, in all but a name, a sovereign nation-state. That's why for so many foreign observers, the question of de jure or legal independence is a perennial hot topic, especially when the elections roll around. If Taiwan already walks and talks like an independent country, then why shouldn't it stand tall and declare itself so? Well, it's complicated. To answer that question, you have to understand the perspective of the People's Republic of China, which sees Taiwan as a province of its own, gone rogue. The People's Republic of China, or PRC, was born in 1949 after the Chinese Communist Party defeated the US-backed Kuomintang, or KMT, in the Chinese Civil War. The KMT fled to the island of Taiwan and declared itself to be the legitimate government of China under the name the Republic of China, or ROC. This is a bit like if America had a civil war and ended with the Confederacy fleeing to Puerto Rico and declaring itself to be the real America. Washington probably wouldn't have taken it sitting down, right? Countries do tend to draw red lines over territorial claims. Well, fast forward to the 2020s, and PRC hasn't forgotten its renegade province. As is normally the case with matters of territory, the government still considers Taiwan to be a core interest, meaning it's something worth going to war over if necessary.
Yes, the year 1964 has begun, and to commemorate the new year, we asked some young people how they think the future will look in 60 years' time. What will the world be like in the year 2024?
There'll be so many people that they'll have to have an overflow into the sea.
I think whenever we have a question, we'll just ask a computer and it will tell us the answer.
Everyone will have their own flying car and they'll just be flying around all over the place.
or I may be at the funeral of a computer.
I don't think there'll be politicians or anything like that. I think there'll be monkeys, and they'll be in charge.
Yes, I think the Coin Bureau deals page will be the place where all the best deals in crypto can be found. No doubt about it. It'll be absolutely fantastic.
Because there'll be more cures for the diseases, and not so many people will get sick.
Anyone who's got any sense will store their money on their own hardware device where no one will be able to get it. And they'll use the Coin Bureau deals page to get the best discounts on those devices.
All dogs and cats will probably be robots by then, and you won't have to take them to the vet or anything, really.
I think when you sign up to an exchange on the Coin Bureau deals page, you'll get discounts on trading fees of up to 60%. It'll be lovely.
I expect they will set aside parts of the country solely for recreation.
One day, the Coin Bureau deals page will offer up to $50,000 in sign-up bonuses on some of the best cryptocurrency exchanges. I can't wait. I really can't. It'll be splendid. So, there you have it. The year 2024 is going to be quite incredible by all accounts. The future's bright. The future's Coin Bureau.
There's nothing you can do to stop it.
But that's not to say that things haven't changed. The PRC hasn't moved on, but the ROC certainly has. Across the strait, whole generations of people have come and gone, and with them, ties of kinds to the mainland have faded. This is borne out in decades of surveys by the Taiwan Election Study Center, which ask islanders about their national identity. Check this out. In 1992, when these surveys began, around 46% of respondents said that they were both Chinese and Taiwanese. 25% said they were Chinese, and just 18% responded simply Taiwanese. But by the 2020s, islanders were singing a very different tune. In 2023, the proportion who said they were both Chinese and Taiwanese fell to 30%, and just 2.5% of respondents described themselves as Chinese. That's a minus 10x on Chinese identity in 3 decades. Bullish for Taiwanese nationalists, though. According to a separate poll by Pew, 67% of respondents now identify themselves as Taiwanese. Now, the cause of this trend is varied and complex, but perhaps most conspicuous among them is PRC's treatment of Hong Kong in recent years. An entire generation of Taiwanese voters grew up watching the spectacle of Chinese authorities trying to stamp out anti-government protests next door. As it turns out, the sight of the PRC strong-arming Hong Kong over what was a pretty tame social movement didn't inspire feelings of Chinese oneness in neighboring Taiwan. The ROC spent more than half of its history as a military dictatorship and only had direct presidential elections since 1996. So it's not a place where democracy is taken for granted. So it's no wonder then that a Democratic Progressive Party or DPP president was elected for the 3rd time in a row. The DPP is the antithesis of Beijing's One China policy. The incumbent president, Tsai Ing-wen, swept into power in 2016 and won a landslide re-election in 2020 on a series of pledges to defend Taiwan's territory, democracy, and right to self-determination. She pledged to increase defense spending, extend military conscription, and has been promoting the democratic Taiwan brand around the world. She also sought closer relationships with governments inside America's sphere of influence, including Japan and a number of Southeast Asian countries. Now, if none of this sounds like the behavior of a mere province in the PRC, well, no kidding. Tsai Ing-wen's policies marked the end of 24 years of relatively closer ties with Beijing. You see, in 1992, the Kuomintang government had met with the PRC and agreed that there is only one China, while tacitly agreeing to disagree over what this meant. But with the election of Tsai Ing-wen in 2016, the DPP went back on this agreement. In response, China cut all of its formal communications with Taiwan and has given it the cold shoulder ever since. At this point, you could be forgiven for thinking that the DPP is a separatist movement with the goal of formally declaring Taiwan as an independent nation-state. But this is not the case. In fact, none of Taiwan's major political parties call for independence. Despite the KMT's tough talk about a vote for the DPP being a vote for war, and William Lai being a die-hard independence supporter, the 2024 election showed that the opposition parties have capitulated to a position pretty similar to the DPP's. Of course, the DPP and KMT, as well as the more minor TPP, or Taiwanese People Party, are bound to talk up their differences. But when it comes to actual policy, none of them propose anything that would really upset the status quo. Now, this is not to say that there isn't support for independence in Taiwan. On the contrary, a 2023 poll by the Taiwan Public Opinion Foundation found that just shy of half of all respondents are in favor of independence. The poll showed that independence was the most desired outcome for Taiwan in every city and county on the island, bar one. Less than a third of respondents supported maintaining the status quo, and fewer than 12% wanted reunification with China. So it seems to us that if maintaining the status quo comes first in Taiwan's politics, it's probably just because it's a weak form of independence and the best thing that the island can get for now, given the PRC's intimidation. Speaking of which, Beijing stands accused of trying to pressure Taiwan with a variety of underhand tactics. These range from too close to comfort military exercises in Taiwan's vicinity to poaching the small number of foreign governments that Taiwan can officially call friends, and even the physical sabotage of Taiwan's communication infrastructure. Now, not everyone is as shaken over Chinese military training as Western reporting might have you believe. According to Brian Heo, a Taipei-based journalist and critic of both China and the US, Chinese military drills, and I quote, are not usually perceived as a threat in Taiwan. He argues that they, and I quote, occur with such frequency, nearly daily, that it just becomes background noise. On the other hand, Beijing is very candid about its ambitious plans for reunification and has been known to make statements that can only be described as threatening. For example, the day before Taiwan's 2024 elections, China's army promised to, and I quote, firmly crush Taiwan's independence attempts of all forms. And when it comes to foreign relations, China's diplomats have been peeling away Taiwan's small band of friends one by one. 2 days after the 2024 elections, the Pacific island of Nauru flipped alliances with the PRC and announced it would cease, and I quote, official exchanges with Taiwan. Nauru was one of Taiwan's last remaining diplomatic allies and is now the 10th foreign government to have switched sides from Taipei to Beijing since Tsai Ing-wen was elected in 2016. There are more well-documented sides to China's efforts to isolate and pressure Taiwan. But one underreported angle is the mysterious severing of undersea internet cables around the island. In February 2023, Taiwan's outlying Matsu Island was left without internet service for over 2 months as the undersea cables it depended on were cut. Taiwan's National Communication Commission claims that 2 ships flying Chinese flags were responsible and says that this was the 27th such incident of cable cutting in the last 5 years. This is just a small example to show that the PRC is by no means passively hoping that Taiwan will fall back in its lap. It is actively running overt and covert operations for this purpose. But crucially, huff and puff as it might, Beijing could not dissuade Taiwanese voters from returning for a third DPP presidency. So how have the Chinese taken the result? Well, if early indications are anything to go by, it seems like Beijing has piped down since the election. So far, the PRC's reaction has been pretty chill compared to previous episodes, such as the visit of the US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan, or the meeting between Pelosi's successor and President Tsai Ing-wen in the US, both of which were considered on the mainland to be egregious provocations. China's muted response was in evidence in state media 2 days after Taiwan's elections. Excerpts of a 2022 speech by President Xi Jinping were reprinted, urging members of the Chinese Communist Party to do better at winning the hearts and minds of the Taiwanese people, and to, and I quote, develop and strengthen the patriotic pro-unification forces in Taiwan and oppose the separatist acts of the Taiwan's independence. Now make of that what you will, but it doesn't sound to us like a government preparing for an invasion. As one senior China analyst with the Taipei-based International Crisis Group put it, and I quote, it's a pretty positive start to the period. They don't want to tear up the gains made in improving US-China relations. So what about the United States? When asked to comment on the outcome of the Taiwan's election last week, US President Joe Biden decided to answer a different question instead. He simply said, and I quote, "We do not support independence." This non sequitur is only the latest addition to his record of confused statements on Taiwan. On at least 4 separate occasions, he's referenced the United States' commitment to defend Taiwan's military when no such commitment exists. Each time, the White House has shrugged it off and insisted that the United States' long-standing policy of strategic ambiguity, which includes no military commitment to Taiwan, has not changed. Biden's rhetoric about President Xi Jinping is no more encouraging. Just a few weeks ago, Biden told reporters that during the Obama administration, he had met with Deng Xiaoping, a Chinese leader who died in 1997. It was, of course, Xi Jinping that Biden had met. When Biden does get his name right, he tends to describe Xi as, and I quote, a thug, and I quote, dictator. The most recent episode of name-calling was last November, when Biden dismissed Xi as a dictator after speaking with him for 4 hours at a critical US-China summit in San Francisco. By all accounts, this summit had otherwise been a success, producing a list of agreements towards repairing the two powers' fraught relationships. China and the United States agreed to resume military-to-military communication, to work together to stem the flow of fentanyl into the US, and also discuss Taiwan's elections, among other things. As for Xi, his comments made quite a contrast. And I quote, "Planet Earth is big enough for the two countries to succeed, and one country's success is an opportunity for another." He said, and I quote, "For two large countries like China and the United States, turning their back on each other is not an option. It's unrealistic for one side to remodel the other, and conflict and confrontation has unbearable consequences for both sides." But back to Biden. What are we to make of his strategic confusion? Sure, the Biden White House has no shortage of lucid staff ready to brush off the president's apparent gaffes. But at the end of the day, it's Joe Biden who has his finger on the red button. The world was reminded of this when he gave the order to start bombing Yemen earlier this month, without asking Congress. To paraphrase his comments after the attacks began, will it work? No. Are we going to keep bombing them? Yes. Now, unless Biden pops his clogs before this year's presidential elections, Democratic voters will most likely be asked to vote for another 4 years of him as commander-in-chief. The Republican alternative is almost certain to be Donald Trump, although he has been charged with a laundry list of 91 felonies by the United States federal and state governments. It doesn't look like this will be an obstacle of his running for presidency again. On the contrary, it seems that this has only strengthened the resolve of his supporters in the Republican Party and also throughout the country. So when it comes to Trump's foreign policy, it's important to not confuse his tough talk on China with a real and hawkish policy. Although it's a mixed bag, Trump's foreign policy is overall closer to isolationism, and Taiwan is a prime example. Publicly, Trump has never made the kind of comments about defending Taiwan's military that Biden has become known for. And privately, he reportedly told one Republican senator in 2019 that if the PRC was to invade Taiwan, and I quote, "there isn't a thing we can do about it." Make of that what you will. But we reckon that out of the two candidates, Biden might be more of a wild card when it comes to Taiwan. If Trump is elected, at least Taiwan won't have to wonder if the US would intervene in the event of an invasion. Now, with that out of the way, we can turn to the question on everyone's mind. What does all that mean for my portfolio? Well, number go sideways, maybe. Look, it's been just over a week since Taiwan's elections, and William Lai won't be president until May. Of course, anything could happen between now and then. But based on the information available, at the moment, we don't think it's time to sound the alarm. And about that war narrative peddled by the PRC and the KMT before the election. Voting for the same party that has been in government for the last 8 years, is it going to bring Taiwan closer to war? I mean, I guess it's true in the same way that Bitcoin going from 41K to 42K is going to bring me closer to a Lamborghini. It's not wrong, it's just drastic. Well, that's all for today's video. If you learned something new, drop a thumbs up to help more people see this. If you think we miss anything important or you have a different view, let us know in the comments. And if you haven't already, now is the perfect opportunity to subscribe to the channel. While you're at it, ding the bell icon so that you can catch the Coin Bureau videos when they're fresh out of the oven. As always, thank you for watching and I'll see you next time. This is Jessica signing off.